So in this video, I'm just going to quickly look at the general rules for the RDP. The rules are actually the same whether you're looking at the eRDPml or the table. There's a couple of questions in the exam that would potentially come from these rules, so it's definitely worth understanding a little bit about some of them. In fact, rule 1 and rule 2 we don't really have to talk about. That's all fairly straightforward stuff. If you don't know about that, the other videos in this RDP section on my website will certainly teach you everything you need to know about them. This emergency decompression one is one I want to spend a little bit of time looking at. What I really want to do is identify how this emergency decompression rules actually split into two different rules. It's all to do with how much you exceed the no decompression limit by. If it's exceeded by no more than 5 minutes, an emergency decompression stop is required, and it's an 8-minute stop at the usual 15 feet, and upon surfacing the diver must remain out of the water for 6 hours. So no more than 5 minutes. It's an 8-minute stop and stay out of the water for 6 hours. That's fairly straightforward stuff. Let's actually now look at the other part, which is the part that sometimes causes confusion. If a no decompression limit is exceeded by more than 5 minutes, a 15-foot 5-meter decompression stop of no less than 15 minutes is urged. And what often confuses people is this part here, the air supply permitting part. In the exam, sometimes the questions are worded along the lines of a 15-minute safety stop or emergency decompression stop is required, perhaps as long as your air supply lasts. Now, seeing those words, as long as your air supply lasts, for some reason makes people think that's the incorrect answer, but that's what air supply permitting means. As long as your air supply lasts. I think the problem that people get with that is they're imagining that you would literally breathe the last breath out of your tank and then cease to the surface or something. That's not what air supply permitting means. Air supply permitting means until you get low on air. Once you're low on air, of course, you're then going to end this emergency decompression stop and make a safe, slow ascent to the surface. So carrying on looking at the rule for exceeding by more than 5 minutes, upon surfacing, the diver must remain out of the water for 24 hours. So what we've got here is we've got an 8-minute stop and then a 6-hour out of the water if it's less than 5 minutes, or a 15-minute plus stop and 24 hours out of the water if the NDL is exceeded by more than 5 minutes. So that means that in a question, they might tell you how long your dive time is. You need to then look at the depth of the dive and the time they spent to figure out whether it was more than 5 minutes they exceeded by the NDL by, or less than 5 minutes they exceeded the NDL by, and answer the question based on that. I've got a few example questions that are looking at that in my videos on this section. So what we're now going to look at is section 4 here, the flying after diving recommendations. Again, just to make it completely clear what they're saying here. So if you get a question that's about flying after diving, if it says just talks about you doing one dive, one simple dive, then the minimum pre-flight surface interval is 12 hours. If you've done more than one dive on a day or multi-day dives, as it says here, then the minimum pre-flight surface interval is 18 hours. The final thing to be aware of is that if you did a decompression dive or a dive that required emergency decompression, so what we were just looking at in rule 3, now the minimum surface interval is at least 18 hours. In fact, it is better to be greater than 18 hours. The final thing I want to draw your attention to is that in section 4 here, the flying after diving recommendations, there is no mention about altitude dives. What that means is that the rules for flying after altitude dives are exactly the same as the rules for flying after a dive at sea level. So now we'll go on to actually look at what rules there are for altitude diving, and that's fairly straightforward. Basically, if you're diving at an altitude above 300 meters or 1,000 feet, then special procedures are required. So you could get a question somewhere in the theory exam saying that you're diving at an altitude. If that altitude is above 300 feet or 1,000 feet, then altitude diving rules are required. If it says you're diving at altitude which is less than 300 meters or 1,000 feet, then you treat the dive as though it is at sea level. Let's have a quick look at what those altitude diving rules actually are. You don't actually need to know this. You don't need to know the special procedures for altitude diving and be able to do it. But as background knowledge, it's good to have. So I'm looking at the metric table here. What we need to know when we're planning an altitude dive is the altitude we're at and the depth we're planning to dive to. So if I was going to altitude and I wanted to do a dive that was going to take me to a depth of 20 meters, but I was an altitude of 2,400 meters, I would look at this and I would plan my dive as though I was diving to 27 meters. What that means is, using my RDP table, I would take my NDL from the 27 meter column, not the 20 meter column. One thing that actually generally would come up maybe in the skills and the environment question is actually what do we need to know when planning a dive at altitude? What we need to know is the altitude, and we need to know the actual depth we're diving to. Those two bits of information are what we use to plan an altitude dive using the eRDPml or the RDP table. So moving on to the special rules for multiple dives. They like to test this. It will usually be tested in terms of a minimal surface interval question, or perhaps it'll be in one of the questions where you have 3 dives and you have to calculate the minimum amount of time it would take you to do all 3 dives. You just need to be aware of the fact that if your pressure group at the end of any dive is W or X, then you are required to do a minimum surface interval of 1 hour. Okay. If your ending pressure group is Y or Z, then you've got to do a much longer minimum surface interval. That's got to be 3 hours. If you want to know why this is, I've got a massive video on it in the DECO theory section. It's listed in there, and I actually clearly prove why these extended surface intervals are required after dives that are fairly long and shallow. The key thing to realize is that to end in pressure group W or X or Y or Z, you'd have to do a pretty long shallow dive, and the RDP has to put this rule in to account for these long shallow dives. That's the sort of question that you might actually see in the RDP exam. The reason for the WXYZ rule is to account for long shallow dives. So the rest of the rules here are actually fairly straightforward, I would say. The ascent rate, I hope you know that, 60 feet a minute. When planning a dive in cold water, that's worth just drawing your attention to. If you got a question that said that you were diving in a cold water lake or something like that, it might ask you for an NDL. Let's say you're diving to a depth of 70 feet in a cold water lake. What is the NDL? Well, you've got to plan that dive as though it's 10 feet or 4 meters deeper than it really is. So if you were doing a 21 meter dive, you should plan it and take the NDL for 25 meters, or 70 feet. You need to take the NDL for 80 feet if it says that it is in cold water. Or if it says you're going to be swimming against a strong current or something, that would be strenuous, and that would be another time that you would want to plan the dive as though it was deeper than it really is, using this rule here. It would be a mean question to put in an exam, but it's the sort of question that I would put in an exam. So now let's move on to number 9. Plan repetitive dive so that each successive dive is to a shallower depth. That is another very important thing to remember. You could be given a question in the RDP exam that says you're planning on doing the following series of dives. 40 feet for 30 minutes, 100 feet for 15 minutes, and 70 feet for 25 minutes, let's say. Now, if you were given this list of dives that you had to somehow plan, you would obviously have to start by making sure that you were applying Rule 9 when you did it. So in fact, you'd plan your first dive in the series to be 100, your second dive to be 70, and your third dive would be 40. So PADI or an examiner, someone writing an exam, could be pretty mean and actually just give you a list of dives, not in the order that you should dive them in, and expect you to actually rearrange the dives and make them in the correct order following Rule 9, which is to plan repetitive dives so that they are gradually getting shallower, or at least that you don't do a dive deeper than a previous dive on the same day. So Rule 10, do not dive below 40 meters, 130 feet. That's the max depth for recreational diving. If you discover you have accidentally descended below that depth, immediately ascend at a safe ascent rate and do an emergency decompression stop of 8 minutes. So another situation where emergency decompression stops might be required is if you accidentally exceed the depth rules and go beyond 40 meters, 130 feet. There are rarely situations where you'll be asked a question on that. The final one, though, is another one where I have definitely seen questions about this. Your residual nitrogen levels are so low that you may plan your next dive as a first dive. So there is such a thing as having no pressure group at all. Okay, if you do a really long surface interval, eventually you will be out of even pressure group A and you have no pressure group. You're a new diver. Okay, it's important to realize that pressure group A is not the lowest pressure group. A is not the lowest group. There is, in fact, new diver is the lowest group, and that means that you can plan your dive as though it is the first dive of the day, effectively. I have seen a question about that in the exam, so be aware that you have no pressure group is possibly a correct answer. Very quick look at the repetitive dive worksheet. I use a version of this in all my videos that I use to explain these sorts of questions. Just a couple of things I'm going to look at as a general look at this worksheet. This worksheet is one that you would get in the exam. At least you'd get one that looked like this. And what you need to do is understand that if you're using the eRDPml, which I strongly advise you to always do because it warns you about the special rules when they kick in, which helps you avoid making mistakes by forgetting to apply a rule. That's the big advantage of the eRDPml over the table, is it warns you about a lot of the special rules. And also another big advantage of the eRDP over the table is you can completely ignore all this stuff. All you need to worry about when you're taking the numbers from the question is, let's say, the depth of the first dive and the time of the first dive, the depths of the second dive and the time of it, and the depth of the third dive and the time of the dive. And once you've got that information, you would be able to get out your eRDPml, you'd work out the pressure group here, then you could have your surface interval, whether it's given to you in the question or not, and you can keep working through it. So the only other thing I really do want to point out is this here, these little dotted lines. These little dotted lines are where you would put 3 if a safety stop is required. The questions that ask you the total amount of time to do 3 dives, and it lists 3 dives with dive times, you have to work out the minimum surface intervals, etc., etc. But you definitely need to remember to put 3 in here if it says a safety stop is required. And if it says a safety stop is not required on any dive as I'm doing it, I always put a big X to show that I had thought about it and I had confirmed it wasn't required. That's just one good habit to be in when you're using this to make sure that you get all those really tricky questions right.